Good evening, everybody. This is a never mind. This is a joint meeting between the city, Gainesville City Commission and the City Plan Board. We're glad that you're all with us. We have Commissioner Johnson joining us remotely. Okay, I fixed my little mute problem there. Welcome, Commissioner Johnson, and then we have the rest of the commission here in the chambers, and then we have our plan board all joining us virtually. So the plan board will not be able to make motions or take any action tonight, but the commission may if we so choose or we get to that point. So the first thing that we need to do is adopt the agenda, and then I'll well, I guess they can't take a motion to adopt the agenda, but we'll just recognize the chair and let her give some introductory greetings. Commissioner A. Santos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we adopt the regular agenda.
Okay, motion and a second to adopt the agenda for this special meeting. Adam, is there anybody from the public that wants to speak to that motion?
No, Mr. Mayor, there is no one on the lines at the time. The floor is yours.
Oh, you're on the beach today. Nice.
There's the story.
Okay, before we vote, I will recognize the chair of the City Plan Board to make any comments or suggestions. Whoa. All right. Hold on, we're having a psychedelic moment here on our screen here in the chambers.
Boy, that is really trippy.
Perception.
I don't know if you all can see what we're seeing. It's I will say that our broadcast staff, there was something wrong and they had to reboot the whole system shortly before the meeting, so that might still be being ironed out.
I think we won solitaire is what happened.
Just bear with us here, folks. Our experts are back there trying to figure out what's happening with our display. Well, Ms. Sutton, I see you. So why don't you, while we're figuring out our sort of visual issues over here, why don't you say hello, and if there's anything that you need us to add or amend the agenda towards, then we'd be happy to hear that from you.
Sure. Thank you all for requesting this meeting. I think we're all excited to be here with the City Commission, as there's a lot of hot planning topics that you all have been discussing. And as we're going into a comp plan update, our members are excited to hear updates from planning staff as to where we stand on the text amendments that we discussed last year with you all. We've seen some of those moving through, and other ones, we're excited to get an update about tonight. I don't really have any, specific prepared comments, but we look forward to discussing the issues as they come through the agenda this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And for the Plan Board members that are with us, I have my participants pane open. So if you want to speak, please just use that raise hand function, and I will try my best to get you in the order that your hand comes up in relation to the lights up here at the dais. I'm not always perfect with that, but I keep a pretty close eye on it, and I'll get to you as quickly as I can. It's the best we can do under these less than ideal circumstances of hybrid virtual live meetings. So with that, I will move back to the commission, and Madam Clerk, will you please take a roll call vote on adoption of the agenda?
Absolutely. Commissioner Ward.
Aye.
Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons. Aye. Commissioner Ariola.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sacco.
Aye.
And Mayor Poe.
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. So with that, I will turn it over to the city manager for introductions, and then we'll get going with our business.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mayor, Commissioners, I'm going to actually sort of turn this over to Andrew Persons, our interim Sustainable Development Director. As you know, the Commission requested a joint meeting between the Commission and the Plan Board to sort of review the work that you've did together about almost 2 years ago at this point, a lot of which has been, we've had a lot of good progress on, some of which is going to be pending with the comp plan, but we're happy to review the status and update both the commission and the board as to where we are. So with that, Andrew.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. Andrew Persons, Interim Director, Sustainable Development. We're also excited to be here. We have planning staff on the line as well. So if there's any specific questions or anything I can't answer, they're here to help me cover any questions. I don't have a formal sort of presentation. I do have, and I think as you saw in the backup, we have some updated information from the list of code amendments that were referred to by the Plan Board and the City Commission back in middle of 2019. I do, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, I actually can share my screen, and what I did, or what we did was we sort of took that list and organized it in a way I think that's a little bit easier to see sort of what's either been approved or is in progress, and what's sort of remaining on the list. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Absolutely.
All right. Can y'all see that? Is it big enough?
Yep. You can bigify it a little bit.
I can bigify it. Let me click the bigify button here. How's that?
Perfect.
All right. So I think as the backup indicated, we sort of went into the original meeting with, I think, about 31 potential code amendments. And then during the meeting, there were several that were added to it. And what we ended up, if you recall, with was sort of a list in totality of everything that either the Plan Board or the City Commission sort of wanted on a work plan. And then through the last workshop, that was ranked in according to sort of importance. And so what you see here is sort of the list that's in your backup, but organized in a way that shows sort of everything that's either been completed or is currently in process. And in process means it has either been to the Plan Board, or it's been been to the Plan Board and it's waiting for commission and approval, or it's been completed, meaning that it's already been made code. So I won't sort of cover the whole list because I think you have seen some of these. Accessory dwelling units was the #1 item that was on the list for the last workshop, and that was completed back in September of last year. Some items that we've been working on that have some overlap with some of your the referrals that the commission made around equitable development includes the heritage overlay. We've had a initial discussion with the Plan Board on some of the draft language, and we're working on answering a few of the questions that the commission had referred from your discussion earlier this year. Urban agriculture just received Plan Board approval last month, and that's going to be coming forward to you for City Commission approval. We're working on the neighborhood workshop notification process that just received Plan Board approval. That'll also be coming forward to City Commission very soon. Right-of-way street vacations. So when you look at the sort of the list in totality, this list represents sort of everything that's in process. Going down, what remains on the list that received the sort of highest priority is FDOT context sensitive areas, which that is something that I think is something that we feel is probably a good comp plan item. And there's obviously been some work that started with the the task force on looking at University Avenue and 13th Street. So I think we're wrapped up in that. And then the other item is the community benefit for increased density. And this very much sort of squarely falls within the inclusionary zoning discussion that the commission had with the around the equitable development framework. And that'll be coming to you, on the 18th, later this week. And then under the medium items, you can see there's still some medium items left on the list. And then there are also a few items that received a low score. So I guess from staff's perspective, what we're hoping possibly to get out of this meeting is some discussion between the plan board and the city commission on what's remaining, on what things you feel should be prioritized, on whether this list or items on the list still make sense, or are there items that are not on this list that you want us working on? So really, that's from the staff's perspective. That's mostly what I wanted to get across. We can answer any questions you have or help facilitate the discussion in any way, but we wanted to cover the overall sort of list. And just to add, yes, we are obviously fully engaged with the comprehensive plan, both internally, and we're getting very close to doing our public launch and start some of our engagement activities with around the comp plan. So with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Persons. We'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Persons, for that. What I would like to do, if to start this conversation, is really look at what I would like to see added to the list or moved up on the list, and have a discussion about why, and engage with the plan board and see how we can just really talk about the importance of what I would like to have moved up, and that's the transit zoning along Waldo Road, which is number 34, and that's a low priority right now. And so I guess that's how I would like to start guiding this conversation, or if we wanted to get everyone's opinion first and then have a conversation, Mayor. How would you like to start it off?
Yeah, I don't really have a strong preference. I think we could kind of go one by one. So with that, and we have Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Santos up as well. But Mr. Persons, can we get a little bit more sort of clarity to the Waldo Road transect item, and where that is, and then what would be necessary to get that to a point where it's ready to go before the plan board and the city commission?
Sure, and let me know if you want me to stop sharing my screen if it's.
Oh yeah, I think you could stop sharing it. Yeah.
Okay.
We have it in our backup, so we're good. Thanks.
So on the Waldo Road transect discussion, this is something actually the plan board has actually been talking about recently. They'll probably have some input on it. But one of the this was originally sort of came up with discussions over some recent or development proposals in the sort of 5 Points area, and the applicability or the appropriateness of having transect zoning on some of these areas, and whether or not the areas around Waldo Road and 5 Points, if transect zoning is the right fit. There are obviously a lot of additional sort of design regulations that come with transect zoning. Oftentimes, because of those, it can make infrastructure be designed in a very sort of specific way. Specifically, I'm talking about things like underground stormwater treatment, which is a hallmark of most of the development that we see in the core of the city, where the land value makes that added expense of putting the stormwater underground viable. Obviously, when you do that, you open up a lot more land for development, or you're not using that land for doing superficial stormwater treatment. And so a lot of the discussion has sort of centered around like timing. Is this a right fit? Is there a better fit to both achieve, a quality urban form, but also to encourage development that we want to see in District 1 in East Gainesville.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Persons. What I would like to do, I would like to listen to the plan board and see what type of recommendations you may have and what type of solutions that you all think from your professional standpoint, what would work with this area. Because like Mr. Persons mentioned, some of the properties in East Gainesville along that Waldo Road corridor are jagged properties. They're very disassembled and disjointed in some areas, so it makes it extremely difficult for someone to potentially develop. So your professional opinion, what would you suggest? What type of recommendations would you make?
So, Chair Sutton, do you think you could maybe summarize the nature of the plan board's discussion around this issue, and maybe any outstanding questions that you still have?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of options, Mr. Mayor, to either allow, I think Andrew summarized some of the issues pretty well. Underground stormwater sort of seems to be the primary challenge for developments because of the building frontage requirements and other design standards that are in the transect zones. So I think there's really two options, either to build some more flexibility into the transect zones. And we talked about this at last month's meeting, also in relation to some of the urban agriculture may also require some flexibility in the building frontage, because they may not have, buildings at, 70, 80, 90% of the frontage if we do get one of those in one of the transect zones. So talking about flexibility for green spaces, possibly for stormwater ponds in areas that don't justify the cost of underground stormwater. Or the other opportunity is to, as we look at the comp plan, look at just a different land use and zoning for that 5 points area that would, have that flexibility if we don't want to change the development standards within the transects.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, the transect zoning, Mr. Persons, what is the requirement for development?
So generally speaking, most of the areas sort of right around Waldo Road, University Avenue is zone U7, which is a urban transect zone. And with that, I think as Chair Sutton mentioned, there's requirements for stricter requirements for building placement, like where the buildings get placed on the property, how much of the building has to be located along any street frontages. That's the building frontage requirement that Ms. Sutton mentioned. And I did want to mention on that item, that is actually one of the items that we've been working through with the plan board. So we're actually in the process of going back and forth on some code language with that. But then there are other requirements with respect to the form of buildings, the amount of window glazing, most of those things that we have. Some things are some of the requirements are unique to transect zoning, and then other requirements, like we have window glazing requirements throughout the city, but in a transect zone, that window glazing requirement goes from about 25% of the face of the building to up to like 60 or 70% of the face of the building. So there's a significant sort of change in in which regulations or the regulations that get applied in transect zoning versus some of our more conventional zoning districts, for instance.
Thank you. And how long has the transit zone been in place?
Since 2017.
And have we seen any development and improvements? I guess my question is this working?
I would say, I mean, it's hard to say like working or not. I would say what staff has observed is like most things. If you have a national business like Wawa or a business, a company that has a lot of means to be able to comply with standards, it's a lot easier. For the smaller uses, the smaller types of like local development that we see, it can be a detriment, or it can be a high bar to meet. Because you think about, like, we have transect zoning along West University Avenue that by and large, the standards for West University Avenue, the zoning's a little bit different, but they're both transect zonings in those areas. And so the same standards that we're applying to some of the development that you've seen come up in the large mixed use buildings are the same standards that get applied to to Waldo Road. And obviously the urban context is very different. Like the actual physical realities of those two areas of university are very different. And the economics obviously are different as well. So anyway, that's all to say that there's definitely, I think that's what we've seen in terms of observation.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Persons. And that was the point I was going to bring up too, about the urban context is drastically different from one location to another location. Is there any middle area as it relates to the transit zoning? Is there something that we can apply that in essence is similar but more flexible? I know Ms. Sutton was talking about we need to maybe create some flexibility within these particular transit zones. That would be great. Is there anything like that now that we've taken a look at that may be applied to this area?
Generally, like when our transect zoning sort of, it steps down, and it's not quite a perfect sort of linear step down, but so if we like looked at a different transect zoning, there may be like fewer the standards by which development has to meet, maybe slightly less, but that also means that generally speaking that the allowed uses would be fewer, the potential development potential would be less. I would say, like, if this was something that's a high priority for the commission, like, we don't necessarily have to figure out the answer tonight. It would just be a question of whether or not this is something you want us to work on. I mean, and I could see, to Ms. Sutton's or Chair Sutton's point, it could be some code changes, it could be some zoning changes, it could be a combination thereof.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Persons. My fellow commissioners, I think this is something we need to really look at, moving up the list, having staff look at various ways that we can implement the transit zone in a more flexible way. And I think what you heard from Mr. Persons and Ms. Sutton is the difficulty that certain development it makes it difficult to develop in certain areas along Waldo Road. And in order for us to make that a more economic impactful location, I think we need to look at the zoning requirements and look at the restrictions, some of the restrictions. Was something that I see as a restriction for development. And so I'm going to ask that we, at some point throughout this conversation, that we look at this particular area and let's move it up the list so we can start actively doing some development in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner
thank
Simmons.
you.
And I want to make sure I'm hearing you right, and I want to make sure Andrew's hearing you right. It sounds to me what you ultimately want is something that's going to more easily encourage and facilitate some redevelopment in that area while not reducing the quality of the development. You want to still have good high quality development, but lower some of the barriers that are preventing it right now. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Thank you, Chair Sutton, for bringing us up to date on that issue. Next, we're going to turn to Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Andrew, can you give me the highlights of the ordinance, of the food truck ordinance?
Sure thing. So if you recall, the prior to the adoption of that, the food truck park ordinance, the city had had limits for how long food trucks could be parked on a given site. Essentially, they needed to be moved off on a daily basis, and so there was interest both from the community as well as from in this case a private party for creating flexibility to essentially have like a food truck park where you have food trucks that are more or less parked and are like essentially like a permanent installation with some accessory seating and other sort of facilities like bathrooms and things like that that the code just didn't provide for prior to that. Generally speaking, food trucks are allowed in any zoning district in the city that allows for restaurant uses. So that's most of our all of our commercial districts, most of our industrial districts, most of our mixed use districts, and with the exception of like some of our, just strictly solely residential districts, food trucks like are allowed. The food truck park has a list of sort of regulations that come with it that were part of the ordinance. I don't remember sort of all of the details, but if you have any questions about the specific details, I can have one of my planners who's on the call cover any specific parts of it. But that's at the high level, that's the main thing.
Thanks. So if I have a food truck and I want to park downtown and serve food, can I do that?
Yes, the food truck ordinance that the city approved primarily deals with food trucks on private property or on public property. Public property being like an actual city park, for instance, or city-owned parcel. There was discussion, I think, at the commission about having food trucks sort of parked in the right of way. Like on streets or in parking spaces. The ordinance that was adopted allows for that or provides for that, but the city doesn't necessarily have an area of any street, for instance, that we had sort of designated like this is like for food trucks to come and set up regularly. But the ordinance that the commission adopted allows for that. It still has to be sort of a city decision about sort of where we designate, if we're going to designate areas for food trucks to serve off of out of city right of way. If you recall, our old ordinance before it was amended also had a restriction of food trucks from operating by a brick and mortar restaurant. I think a minimum distance of 50 feet. And that was eliminated from the amendment as well. So that was something that I think had come up during the original food truck ordinance between some of the downtown brick and mortar restaurants. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I have a question about the community benefit for increased density. So, and I see that that's linked to the inclusionary zoning,
Mhm.
which we are going to be tackling in the comprehensive plan update.
Separate from that, it's there. We'll be bringing a ranking for a separate solicitation to your meeting on this Thursday.
Can you explain what that means?
Yes, sorry. So we're going to be if you recall, the city actually went out with a request for proposals for a
Oh, that,
consensus-
yes. I remember that. Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that 2 years ago now, I brought this up about a community benefit, not necessarily related to inclusionary zoning. So I want to make that clear that I was concerned that we very easily increased people's property values at a commission meeting with 4 eyes, and people are able to, go from 5 stories to 8 stories pretty easily with no necessary benefit to the city. And to me, it feels like there could be something in place where, and I know that many other cities have done this, where if you're going to increase the value of someone's land or property by very easily, doing something different with zoning or increased density or special use permit, et cetera, like, why don't we have options for the city where we are getting some benefit out of it?
Mhm.
And to me, that wasn't necessarily linked to affordable housing as inclusionary zoning is. So I'm wondering where along the way that got put into the inclusionary zoning bucket.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it is there, if we could take it out and deal with it as a completely separate issue.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, we could take it out. I think what you're describing is in terms of like the city commission, considering a land use change and the potential sort of change in value can be linked. It still sort of falls under the moniker of inclusionary zoning because typically that sort of linkage is usually done through for around affordable housing. But generally speaking, as long as there's a sort of nexus between like what we're requiring for a change in land use from one thing to another and a clear list of standards that we're applying to, like the city has the ability to do that. So for instance, like on a small scale, we have some very minor modifications that are permitted in code. We actually have a list that says, okay, if you want to change your street side setback from by 3 feet, like you can do so with an administrative modification, provided you provide one of these other compensating benefits, like an increase in glazing or an increase in, so those things you can do, like they have to be in code. They can't be sort of just negotiated on the fly. They have to be sort of listed out. They have to have clear standards about when they get applied. But that is absolutely possible. We actually have some examples of that already in the code where we provide for a variety of means to get additional height to a building. And there's like, you can dedicate open space, you can, create, you can provide affordable housing. You have these sort of standards by which you provide.
Right now?
Right now, yes.
Okay, so when we are increasing like height on a building,
Mm-hmm.
then we automatically require the developer, whoever, to provide a benefit?
Yeah, those benefits are listed. What we see normally is there's a one of the ways to get additional height is through structured parking, providing parking in the building, and that's usually what most developments use to get additional height. And that was part of that list. you provide these benefits and you can get, you know, the additional height.
Okay.
So we already have that framework in code.
We have the framework, but it doesn't seem like it's expansive enough.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that if the commission sort of iterated what they were hoping to get out of it, in terms of what are the things that the commission feels are good sort of community benefit items, then that's something that we could work on. I mean, typically, like, well, my advice to the commission would be to not sort of add a bunch of things that are maybe on the periphery of what your true goal is. So if your true goal is we want to increase the supply of affordable housing, my recommendation would be to focus on that. Because if you start adding sort of other things like generally speaking, like it's not a dig on development, but they're going to find whichever is the most sort of convenient to provide, in terms of like what to get that, you know, that value, either additional density or additional height. And that's what's going to be what'll end up making it into a development plan. Okay. So I would just caution that, you know, rather than sort of maybe expanding the list like this, maybe it needs to be more zeroed in on what the commission's, you know, real like firm goals are.
And does this, right now I'm seeing it as part of the comprehensive plan update. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I would say that's still the case. That's the way that we've been sort of thinking about it. So if there are, you know, part of that discussion comes at the, you know, the community, you know, sort of identifies a list of things that are, you know, high priority to the community that can be sort of linked to a, you know, to some sort of compensating benefit.
Okay. My preference would be, and you tell me if you think that this would work, is that we work on this outside of the comprehensive plan, because I see that as being, we're already 2 years, we're almost 2 years where we're getting this update. This was probably one of the only things that, not one of the only, but it was incredibly important specifically to me, which is why I brought it up. And the comprehensive plan is going to be at least another year out. And then before we actually get any policies in place to support the comprehensive plan, and that's what, another 2 years. So we're 4 years out from my original intention. So I personally would love to work on this outside of the comprehensive plan to get something put in place a little bit sooner. And I'm asking you if you think that that would work with the framework that you all already have in place, because I don't want to do something that's going to be counterproductive, but I do want to get something done sooner rather than later, and certainly sooner than 1.5 years to 2 years out.
Yeah, so I guess I would say the plan board is, or the comprehensive plan is probably about 6 months out, you know, until we have like a fairly solid draft at least.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah. So I guess we can certainly sort of start the conversation, and I do think that there will be opportunities with the ongoing work potentially if the sort of recommended vendor is selected on Thursday. There'll be ongoing work with them to link the work in the comprehensive plan to any code amendments. I would say like it's the only thing from staff's perspective that I would feel would be a challenge would be sort of identifying what the community wants without using the comprehensive plan as a basis for that. Unless the commission just had, yep, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And then that's pretty straightforward. Okay.
So I think what I'm going to do is ask our policy research team, if you're listening right now, is to work on something more specific around the not around the comprehensive plan, around the community benefits for increased density. And then those recommendations, we can either, discuss at a commission meeting or somehow come to consensus about some things. And then maybe those recommendations can be given to you to incorporate, or you all can do some research on your own, and build into the community engagement process this specific piece of it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean that sounds fine. If that's if that's the direction the commission wants to go.
Okay, well, one is either you all do the work
Yeah.
or the policy research team does some of that work. So
So I'll jump in. We're more than happy to partner with the policy research team.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind we're pretty maxed out in Andrew's shop right now on work. So we'll take whatever assist we can get.
Yeah.
okay, I don't think it necessarily needs to be put into a motion, but I just think that the commission can, will know that I'm going to be working with the policy research team on specifically this to bring back to be then coordinate with you all on the comp plan.
Okay, thanks. Were there any other items, Commissioner Johnson?
There probably will be later, but for now, I don't have any more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On to Commissioner De Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there is some disconnect from what Commissioner Johnson's saying and what Mr. Persons is saying. Because Commissioner Johnson, I think you're more about when the actual zoning is approved, like someone's at single family 4 and they want to get DT zoning. Is that what you're kind of?
Yeah, that's part of it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't know if we can legally, that's I guess more quasi-judicial stuff, because what Mr. Persons was talking about was more, once somebody has a zoning, then they can go from 6 to 8 stories. Is that correct, Mr. Persons, or are there other ways, avenues?
Yeah, there are. I mean, there are ways that some inclusionary zoning programs do have a capture at a land use change. So it is, and I think this is sort of from staff's perspective where we were coming at this from IZ perspective, in being able to capture that if that's the sort of the will of the body and the research bears it out.
Thank you.
But I guess to Commissioner Johnson's point, if there are other things that we want to put on the table than just affordable housing, then that would be a point of question.
For Waldo Road, I'm okay with us looking at maybe there's a hybrid that can be done, but I do want to make sure that we do keep the high quality, and intrinsic zones are walkable development, and that is an area that we do want to have it become more walkable, because it's not really safe right there. It's just cars going in and out. So I think that's one of the things to keep in mind. One of the areas I'd like for us to consider moving forward on a little quicker, because it's removing parking minimums. It's an easy code fix. It wouldn't take staff very long at all, just a kind of word search. And it would have a direct impact on the cost of housing. Parking is a big cost of housing, and then removing that mandate for it would reduce the cost of housing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And hello, Plan Board. It's good to see you all, virtually at least. I'm going to speak broadly. I have four goals that I'm looking for us to achieve in the next year. And the first thing is for us to work on projects that are going to increase the stock of affordable housing. I would be in favor of a lot of the proposals that have been mentioned before. I'm glad we're moving forward with things like inclusionary zoning and set-asides. The second thing is economic development, and there's a whole number of things here that are listed. Parking was mentioned, but also definition of infill development, vacant storefronts, things like that. I think this is an opportunity for us to address those specific issues. Third is sustainability for design, and so that's mentioned I think here on number 21, so design standards, so talking about how we can require more sustainable design standards for buildings in certain areas. The fourth thing is walkability. I think that's hugely important. You can see the reference of transect zones, infill, and the context-sensitive areas for FDOT. I think those are priorities for me too. And I picked those four because I think that our land development code can have a direct effect on all four of those goals in broad strokes. And you know, I could go down and mention sort of each thing on this list that I want us to get moving on. That includes focusing on green space. That's sort of a lower priority. I am a huge fan of the urban agriculture. I'm glad that was mentioned at the top of the meeting. I would like for that to continue to be a priority. I know that's going to take a little bit of more contextual work, but I'd like to see that come forward in future proposals. Sidewalk requirements are another huge one. That goes back to the goal of walkability. I think that we have very incongruous sidewalk requirements if you sort of look at the different areas of our city. I think that goes back to safety. I think that goes back to quality of life, which ultimately ties back to economic development and housing. So yeah, just to recap. So I like that we're looking at parking, the contact zones, building frontage, increased density, the storefronts, parking, demolition by neglect. I mean, that was something that we've talked about a few times. And then green spaces, design standards, and the urban agriculture.
Okay, thank you. I did want to, I had a conversation with Chair Sutton, and one thing that came up in that conversation, and Madam Chair, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up. If you have anything you want to add, please do. I'm not trying to take any thunder away from you, but you know, we're in an incredibly ambitious comprehensive plan update. You know, possibly a unique approach nationally to our comprehensive plan. We've got this highly inclusive list of priorities that the Plan Board and Commission have developed collaboratively over the last couple of years. We have many other community goals that all, one way or another, find their way through the Sustainable Development Department. Yet we're without a permanent director of sustainable development. And not only that, we're understaffed because of the positions sort of surrounding the interim status of that position. And so, Mr. Feldman, if you're able to, or if somebody from Human Resources can update the commission on the status of that position and when we can expect it to be filled on a permanent basis, so the rest of the positions that are so important to this process can also be filled, just so I think we have some stability as we move forward on these incredibly ambitious, you know, sort of tasks, items, and overall policy changes that we're working on.
So, Mayor, I'm looking at the end of April, beginning of May, based upon the recruitment schedule that I saw over the weekend.
Okay, so is this the third search?
This will be the second.
This will be the second search? Okay, and so that is currently being advertised?
I believe we're getting ready to launch the advertising.
Okay, and then that will be open for how long? 60 days?
Should be a little bit less than that.
Yeah, okay. And then once you have all the applicants, what's the turnaround time between that and when you narrow it down to your finalists, typically?
It depends on availability of the panel and the interviewees. on there, but a couple of weeks. That's why I think I'm comfortable telling you by the end of April, beginning of May.
Okay. Okay, that's clearly important, and you know, I'll let Chair Sutton share her thoughts as well. You know, as somebody who's served on the plan board for a while now, this. So the last update we did, right after we were done with it, we then hired a new director of planning and development. Like right after we adopted everything. And that was really unfair, I thought, to that individual as well as, you know, what we were trying to do as a city. Because she was not part of any of those discussions or any of that process. She kind of came in after it was all done. And, you know, I think a valid concern is that we don't want that to happen again. We want whoever the next director of sustainable development is, you know, whether that ends up being Mr. Persons or somebody new, that they are an active part of this process, and they're very clearly hearing the needs of the community, the needs of you know, staff, and then all of this discussion from the plan board and the commission on how to move forward. That they're actively engaged in a part of those discussions, and so part of this, I think there are some things that we can work on and continue moving forward with, irrespective of who that next person is. But if we reach a point where that position is going to be delayed even further before being permanently filled, some of this needs to pause. Like some of this process needs to pause to wait for that person to come on board and then begin, you know, guiding that and being a very integral part to you know, how we get to the end point where something comes back to the plan board and city commission for final consideration and adoption. So, you know, I want, with a little bit of institutional knowledge, want to remind us of, you know, the last time that this happened and try to avoid some of those, you know, I think unfortunate setbacks that we had because of the way that entire process and hiring ended up happening. Chair Sutton, do you want to add anything to that point?
I'll just echo a lot of what you just said. I think, you know, everything that's going on with the comp plan, the community conversations, there's just so much value to a planning director participating in that process and not coming in afterwards and missing out on that. Because I think it gives an opportunity to engage with the community and get to know the city in a way that we only do every 10 years. So it's a missed opportunity if we do not get a permanent planning director in that position shortly. I'm not sure what all has happened in the last 2 years. I think we've put a lot of pressure on this planning department, the Department of Sustainable Development, you know, including, you know, it was unforeseen that, you know, dealing with mask policies and, you know, everything from like the rental house inspections. I mean, a lot of new work has been created for this department with an interim director. And I think that's a tough position to put someone in. I don't think that that's fair. I think that we need to move quickly to get a permanent person in that position. You know, I think obviously Mr. Persons has proved he's, you know, completely capable and doing a wonderful job in that position. You know, if it's him that gets the permanent position, that would be wonderful. If there's an outside person, that's great. But I would like whoever it is to benefit from these comp plan conversations and, you know, all of these text amendments as well, to know what our priorities are and be a part of these conversations and not come in after the fact, because there's a lot to be gained this year as we move through it. So I would just encourage the city manager and human resources to move as quickly as possible to fill this position.
Yeah, thanks. Or if there's a delay, we need to know that so we can, sort of hit the pause button on some of that critical work that needs to be done, when you need a person like that present for the discussion. Mr. Ackerman.
Thank you very much. I want to echo the same thing. I think one of the drawbacks to having an interim director is a difficulty in both recruiting and retaining good staff. And I think we've seen some of our good staff leave, both from retirement and also just to go to other places. And I think we need to have some stability in that position to attract some good people. And so I think it's really important that it's a priority that we get somebody permanent in that position. I've worked with Andrew for a long time, and I would be delighted if he was the candidate. I'd also just volunteer on a whole nother issue, on the issue that Commissioner Johnson was talking about. I think there are a number of things we could do that would emphasize the so-called trade-ups for special use permits, increased heights, things like that. I think I would support Commissioner Hayes Santos' position on eliminating or reviewing the elimination of mandatory minimum parking requirements. I do think that that's the general consensus is that minimum parking has not done what it's supposed to do, and that it does add unnecessary cost. I do also think that you end up with the market basically establishing how much parking they want to provide for any given project, and that has to do obviously with the context of the project. So I would very much support, for instance, the idea that mostly what we're getting is structured parking by giving height and enhancements. I think getting rid of that as an enhancement and using some more pointed enhancements would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ackerman. And I think that's exactly the kind of thing that Andrew and Commissioner Johnson were getting at. Like, let's really, it doesn't have to be complicated. Let's really just look at that list and make sure that everything on it is what we really want. We don't want the easy, I'm not going to say something flip, but we don't want the, hey, this is cheap and easy to do, so every project does that, and it gets us a bunch of stuff that really doesn't help us, push our goals any further down the path. And I know that there's enough historical data from different communities on, what they include and what works, that we can get that back to the commission plan board relatively quickly. Andrew, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to use this as an opportunity for a shameless plug of our wonderful planning staff. You have a really stellar planning staff over here at the Thomas Center. Myself notwithstanding, and they do amazing work, and they've been covering a lot of bases in the last 2 years, and I think we're always excited in the department to take on new things. Like we really don't know like the word no over here. We usually there's an opportunity to get involved in something the city's doing, even if it doesn't directly sort of line up with our department. We jump on that opportunity because I think we all feel really strongly about the work that we do. There's just, frankly, there's just not enough of us over here. That's the challenge I think that we've we've faced. Like, we have great staff, and I think great staff that'll have a long career with the city. We just, it's just always a challenge with recruitment and retention, just because it's a great place to work, but there are a lot of other great places to work as well. So, but I do appreciate the conversation. I just wanted to give a shout out to planning staff.
Thank you for bringing us back to that, which is sometimes we overlook. Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so Andrew, I think everyone thinks you and the staff are doing a great job. So I have a question, just so that I can be reminded, and then potentially sort of something to add. When we talk about the vacant storefronts, can someone remind me what was the action, or what's the thing that is intended to sort of be done about that?
Andrew, you just took a bite of apple, so that probably goes to you.
Sorry about that. No, I think, this is obviously not a condition that's unique to Gainesville. There are a lot of like economic reasons why we have vacant storefronts, particularly in new projects, new mixed-use projects. My understanding of this referral was to look at, to do some research and look at, are there ways that, either through code or potentially through other sort of more programmatic methods, that we can ensure that vacant storefronts are not vacant, that they get filled with the build out of the building. There's some things that may be possible to do from a code standpoint. Most of what we've seen from other communities is more sort of guerrilla type, pop-ups and other sort of avenues along those lines. But there is, I think, and you probably have read articles about it in Strong Towns or other things, there is somewhat of a financial disincentive to improve those spaces. But that's my understanding of what that item is. Thank you.
And potentially, I don't know if this would make it worse, but one of the things that I think we brought up, and I don't know if I got it on the list last time, was essentially more of an effort to try to promote, local businesses, potentially, particularly in certain zones of the U.S. where around sort of UF and where we're doing all these redevelopments, and looking at potentially trying to limit conventional chain businesses in certain parts of the city. Again, it tries, I get a lot of comments about, obviously all of the change that's sort of going on, which is it's not necessarily bad, but, the loss of some of those quirky and local businesses, and those being either sort of driven out or out of business or driven somewhere else. And so, I feel like, as a long-term Gainesville resident, that's something that I think is of value to the community, and we should be looking at, ways of doing that. And then the other thing too is, and this might sort of gets to the sustainability, but and I wouldn't move this up to a top of the list, but I think that just trying to sort of think about sort of planning and ordinance to promote what's going to be coming, electrification from the electric power industry, and just making sure that as we're sort of thinking about Gainesville of the future, that that we're laying so the infrastructure and the ability for that to happen, particularly when things are getting sort of redeveloped, and making sure that that those projects are sustainable, and sort of looking forward to that type of future, because there's a lot of work from the electric power industry trying to sort of make sure that we can sort of build out to meet these different sort of climate goals and things like this. So those are the couple things that I just kind of wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, all right, thank you. And for the storefront thing, I'll share with you a concept I floated a few years ago. I don't know how long it all blends together, and I think it had some real interest from particularly the startup community, and I think some people within government, but it never quite took off. And that was that the city, perhaps in partnership with some other folks, or not, would create a fund that would help subsidize rent at vacant storefronts for younger companies. People just starting their own business. You put some parameters on it that they'd be, locally owned with a focus on women, minority-owned businesses. And then, so the first year you'd maybe cover 30% of the rent, and the next year 15, and then the third year, 0. Serving the dual purpose, right? You eliminate those vacancies, and the perception of blight or lack of economic vitality, and you also help in those first 2 difficult years of starting a business, help relieve some of the pressure on the one thing that has to be paid, or you gotta shut your doors. So this is getting into, I think, the city manager and Andrew's plea to not pile on too much without added, resources or staff. But I think it is something that bears another discussion. It could potentially be paid for through GCRA dollars. It is certainly we don't always have to spend money on infrastructure through GCRA. It can be on programmatic initiatives as well. And we could really target it towards the types of businesses and the types of areas that we think are going to have a real stimulative effect. And I think that would not be hard to identify. And then the other thing that had been discussed in that, and I don't think it went too far, but I also think it's irresponsible to not include it as part of the larger conversation, is a vacancy tax. That, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a particular development that has had their ground floor retail vacant, save a convenience store, ever since it opened. And, that we could pretty easily create an incentive for them to put somebody in there. And this is not a novel idea, right? Like many communities are doing this nationally around the world. But city managers reminded me that we're preempted from doing that in the state of Florida. But there are other ways to sort of create an incentive to have somebody utilize their space, as opposed to just let it sit there until they can get the exorbitant rents that they're holding out for. But I think, I still believe the most direct impact you can have is really trying to target and help the type of locally owned startup type businesses that you love to see in a community, that we know sort of keeps their wealth local, and helps you achieve that second goal of taking vacancies off the market and putting somebody in that space. I think that's sort of a separate discussion from what we're having, but also I think it's a valuable one, and there's some good models out there already that we could turn to that we wouldn't have to really necessarily reinvent the wheel to do it. And that generated lots of interest, and so I'm going to start with Commissioner Ward, and then I'll go to the folks on the plan board and you, Andrew. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So along those same lines, that's something I've been talking to folks about for a couple of years now, and it just never seemed like the right time to have the conversation. And I'm not sure, this probably isn't either, but since we're having it, let's have it. A way that we could very directly affect those empty properties and be very intentional about who they get rented to and who gets incentivized to get those spaces, is that the GCRA or some other city entity could lease them, build them out, because a lot of the problem is they're not built out. I mean, they're just waiting for the right national company to come make that long-term 5 or 10 year lease that a local company is never going to do. The city could be that lessor and make the improvement and then sublease it to someone who meets whatever qualifications we're looking for in a program. Now, that there are some dangers to that, in that we're in some ways incentivizing people not to rent their stuff because they might get the idea the city will come along and do it anyway. So I see that danger. But if we're interested in subsidizing and in incentivizing and promoting a very specific kind of business owner to build wealth in a particular community, we could absolutely do that by just leasing it as a city entity and then subleasing it to someone who met the program requirements that we develop or that our staff develop. That's very direct economic development, and we could certainly do that. I'm sure it's probably been done elsewhere, but if it hasn't, I'm willing to hear all the reasons that it doesn't work, because I'm more than happy to say, okay, that was a bad idea. But I also think that it's something that under the right circumstances could work and could very directly develop the kinds of businesses and the kinds of places where we're trying to get it done, instead of sitting here and waiting for those ground floor spaces to get developed one of these days, when some of them have been sitting there for more than a decade already. So just a thought, nothing we have to take action on, but it's a thing that I've been thinking about for a while and would love to hear other people's thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ackerman.
Thank you. I would like to volunteer for, among those things that we should consider assisting. Over the years at the Plan Board, we've sort of sadly overseen the demise of a number of cultural type businesses in rental spaces that have been, supplanted by large buildings. And some of those cultural kind of areas and businesses really contribute to a vibrant street life. They contribute to nightlife and all the things that you want to have a complete economic system of both day and night. So I would very much like to see some of that vacant space that we're considering subsidizing be reserved for cultural spaces. And that would, for me, would be a very broad category of what that would be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Andrew, I'm going to skip you real quick and go to Member Hawkins, and then I'll come back to you. Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you very much, Mayor. I really love hearing this conversation. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said, from Commissioner Hayes Santos' suggestion that we prioritize the parking discussion to Commissioner Johnson's discussion that we find ways to leverage other city resources to talk about the community benefit discussion. I had two things that I wanted to mention. One's along those lines. Before I get to them, I want to respond to your suggestion, Mr. Mayor, about finding ways to support locally owned businesses. I would suggest that this is a topic that's rife for Mr. Bredfeldt's expertise. And I would identify a couple of great examples that the city has already done along these lines. First and foremost being the Catalyst building. We have used that, we use direct city ownership of the structure and city CRA funds to rehabilitate it. We've used it to support private sector startups. We've used it to bring University of Florida employees closer to Depot Park to help energize that part of town and get people visiting those local businesses when the park's maybe not necessarily active. We have employees in that area that can go to the restaurants and other kind of secondary economic activities that have built up around it. Talking about cultural activities, another great example is the Cultural Arts Coalition, which operates out of a city-owned building, the Wilhelmina Johnson Center in the Fifth Avenue neighborhood. So we have a lot of examples where this has worked really well, and it's always been done not through sort of subsidies, but through direct city ownership of real estate and managing it to achieve some of these community goals. And I would, so that's my 2 cents. Is let's look for ways to expand those additional existing kinds of activities. The 2 things that I wanted to mention, one is along the lines of what Ms. Sutton mentioned and what Mr. Ackerman mentioned, that we really do need to support our staff in part by ensuring that they know that they have the longevity and the stability that they need to flourish. And I know there's, HR things that happen that are outside of the city manager's control and outside the department's control. And so, it's to point that out is not to cast any aspersions, but I would underscore your emphasis, Mr. Mayor, that that's significant, and my fellow board members mentioned that that's significant. I would add one, as a resident of an historic district, and also as a plan board member who's excited about the things we're talking about with the heritage overlays, I would add to that staffing discussion that we need to make sure that we have a long-term invested historic preservation planner working for the city. I think that makes a difference for the kind of staff review we get for the Historic Preservation Board, and it also will make a difference to whether those heritage overlay conversations are successful, and also who we assign the task of helping to expand those heritage overlays to protect some neighborhoods that aren't historic districts like the Borders community. I do think even without making staff constraints, though, there's a couple things that we could do to use staff time more effectively and maybe get more out of what our staff are doing. One item that I would suggest, and I think those staffing issues are the most significant, but one that I think that we're overlooking, and I think it's going to take city commission, the city commission saying with the singular voice this is something they want the city manager to do or want the city planning department to do. We spend a lot of time and energy at the staff level, at the plan board level, and I know at the city commission level, processing private sector initiated comp plan amendments and legislative land development amendments. Those are very important, but I think we could prioritize instead the kinds of things that are on this list that's in our backup today. So I would urge you all, each of you, to think about that. And if you agree that these should come first and a privately initiated item should come second, just to tell the city manager that. We have state laws that tell us the pace at which we have to approve quasi-judicial items, but not the legislative items. The city has full reign to make those priorities. And I think that we can prioritize the stuff on the list faster than the stuff that an individual property owner comes and asks us to do. Again, not suggesting those privately initiated amendments are not significant. They absolutely are, and we absolutely need to give them due attention. Just they need to be taken, maybe in the order they receive after these. So that's sort of my 2 cents there. And the very last thing that I'll mention is something that I wasn't necessarily aware of 8 months ago, but that I've come to be aware of more recently. And I know the attorney that represented the Seminary Lane neighbors, or the Fifth Avenue neighbors who were involved in the Seminary Lane petition, notified y'all about. And that's that the city makes a lot of decisions through technical review committee meetings that kind of happen virtually. So staff members will make decisions as a technical review committee without having a hearing. And that puts applicants at a disadvantage and residents at a disadvantage that want to be involved in those processes. And so I would recommend, again, the city commission bringing that up for an item to discuss. And if it looks like something that you think should change, talking to the city manager and talking to the city attorney staff, so that those, when decisions are made by the technical review committee, they happen in a process. And Alachua County is actually a really great model for that. About 10 years ago, they started holding just routine, I think monthly technical review committee meetings. They have a different name for it. They might call it their DRC. Ms. Sutton probably knows. I know she does work at the county as well as the city, where staff meets and makes these decisions. And it's just done in a meeting room in the county administration building. So members of the public that want to participate, or even applicants, can come and see the process a little bit better. So that's it. Thanks for the opportunity to meet together. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Mr. Person.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add to the vacant storefront discussion. One thing that we could potentially look at in terms of something on the regulatory side is requiring that adding some code that requires the ground floor spaces to be built out to like a white box standard. So they're actually like a more of a finished sort of mid-range kind of space. Right now, as you see, some are finished to a white box, some are, essentially like open construction still. So that's something that we can do from a land development code perspective. We are preempted generally on a lot of building code issues, but from a land development code, we can sort of require that with a fairly straightforward code amendment.
All right, very helpful. Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to respond to some of the comments that I've heard. So I'm in 100% agreement with Thomas about the privately initiated versus the commission priorities. And I'd love to hear from you all if you're in agreement with that, because that would be simple direction to the city manager. In terms of Harvey Ward and incentivizing and possibly using CRA funds for vacant storefronts, I'm more in favor of what Thomas mentioned about either direct city ownership of something, because I feel like I'm not a fan of improving someone else's property that is not our own, that will ultimately benefit, some businesses, of course, but I feel like it's incentivizing bad behavior in the city. And I would much rather us build out something similar. I mentioned this at a couple of meetings I've had recently, but a community land trust idea, but for businesses. And I'm wondering if that's a model that we've seen across the nation, and something we might be able to adapt here. So I've asked that, some folks do some research about that. And that is, those are my comments right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner A. Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of the same concerns that Commissioner Johnson had about the vacant storefronts and us spending a bunch of money and on how that would work, but always open to things. I think one of the other things we could that we talked about on the vacant, kind of a short-term solution, and I think I don't remember, Commissioner Ward was there, and I don't know if it was Commissioner Simmons or Commissioner Ariola, but of programs that we could do of us, in essence, like covering the liability insurance for a pop-up store, and also having some mandates in the code where you have to put something like somewhat pretty or put art in the windows of the vacant places, so at least there's some kind of action instead of just being a big open space in some of them. One other thing too is it's the government buildings are mainly, the county has the majority of vacant space in the core of the city. That's one of the things too that I think has to be addressed, is that like the governments in town and how we make sure that they put their places to use, because over the years a lot of the vacant spaces have been kind of filled. And then one other thing on trying to help reduce vacant, I think building it out, another thing that other cities I think have done too is making a maximum size that a space could be too, of a retail or commercial space. Because one of the things that you see some of these places do is they're making it large, so a big national company will come in and use it, but most local people don't have the money to build out 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square feet of space. People do have money to build out 1,000 square feet or 1,500 square feet. So looking at ways that we can make it cheaper for someone to rent out a space as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I love the idea of requiring a certain level of build out. You called it a white box standard, is that right, Mr. Persons? Okay. I'd like us to consider that because it's almost blight to develop a block of commercial space and then leave it completely unfinished inside with dirt floor and no finish for years. So whatever we can do to prevent that in the future, as well as deal with what exists in that regard now, because while it's fine to say we wish it weren't there, now it is. So we need something to move that along. And some of it, as Santa Fe downtown develops, the Blunt Center, some of the space that we're specifically talking about is going to be leased. I mean, I think we can kind of see that. Part of it has already been leased in the last few months, and I think more of it will be as there's more going on within a block or two of it. Commissioner Johnson, you're absolutely right. An urban land trust certainly could, community land trust, urban land trust, could definitely do residential and urban, or residential and commercial space at the same time. There's no reason, matter of fact, they should have multiple considerations, and some of the more successful ones do represent commercial space as well. So I would hope that that would be the case. But I really like that requiring that white box level of development, and Commissioner Santos, I like the idea of limiting the square footage as well in some of those, because we kind of know what some of the developments are shooting for, and the kind of lease that they're trying to get written on a national basis, but it really doesn't seem to be working. So we should consider that. I want to be careful that we don't solve the last problem, that we look forward to what's coming in the economy. So we should be careful with that as well. But yeah, we should learn some lessons from what has been successful and what hasn't been successful over the last decade. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sacco.
Mr. Mayor, I'll agree that I really like Mr. Person's suggestion of a white box. Is that what it's called? To have some minimum standard of build out. I know the exact building we're all talking about. I knew it as a student. I'm still waiting for development to go into it. And I often ask myself, until someone told me, well, the building isn't built out and it's never going to be by a small local business, so it's going to stay vacant. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about Commissioner Santos' suggestion of maybe limiting the amount of space that it could be, the square footage. So I really like that idea. I also like the idea of just having art to cover it up if it's vacant. If all of these ideas aside, if you can't do anything with it, can you at least put art up so it's not blight-like and just empty? I think that's the least the developer or owner of the building could do for that storefront, is put up art so it's not a complete eyesore. And because I missed supporting it on the first round of comments, I really like Commissioner Johnson's idea to reassess what our trade-offs are on to increase the benefit and development. I think that it would be intelligent to look at, as you, Mr. Mayor, said, that we don't get all of these trade-offs that we don't really want or are built up because they're the cheapest or the easiest. So I think it would be good to reassess that list of what our priorities would be. I know mine would be getting more affordable units. And I think that keeps, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think that keeps with the state statute that whatever, if you ask for affordable housing, there has to be some tangible benefit involved. I think that would meet it. So I am excited about where we could go. I think we have good ideas, and I look forward to hearing more from the plan board. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blythe.
Thank you, everybody. Just a quick comment on the development. So as an architect, we come up across these items quite often. So if the space has been kind of underdeveloped, if it's a cold, dark shell, for instance, as some of the spaces we're referring to, most of the the critical items here that are cost related are generally the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. So internal framing, sheetrock, things like that, far less critical. But those MEP systems are really what carries a lot of cost to the upfront sort of push to get the space developed. So if the owner or the developer is not offering enough kind of incentive in that tenant improvement build out cost, sometimes it's to cover design fees, sometimes it's to cover that upfront build. If there's not enough there, that's when you run into the situation that I think we're all familiar with. So it may be important to define, kind of how we want to spec out that white box spec, but I do think something in that line is critical. I will say the dirt floors are tough because it does allow for a lot of flexibility in terms of what goes into the space, whether it's under slab plumbing or electrical. Maybe there's some definitions that are put in. Maybe there's some leave out areas. So I think there's a little bit of flexibility there. But again, defining that white box spec will be pretty important. And I think I would really push to recommend focusing on the major kind of elements of the HVAC system, the electrical panel. Plumbing is probably the third priority there, but the electrical and mechanical often carry the highest cost impact. And then to address the idea of limiting size, I assume this is for ground floor only. We really wouldn't want to do that in any of our multi-story buildings. I'll use the Innovation District as an example. Sometimes you come along and there's a tenant that wants to take down 15,000 square feet, and that's not unheard of. It's actually kind of occurring as we speak in certain buildings. So limiting that size above ground floor, I would definitely recommend against. Ground floor, I think there could be some merit there, but there also should be a process to potentially apply to have a ground floor space be bigger. If you did establish a minimum than that minimum, you would not want to preclude, let's say that you set the minimum in a certain district to 1,500 square feet. If somebody landed a tenant that wanted to go in and it was very appropriate to the street level, at 3,000 square feet, there would need to be a process to be able to allow that. Otherwise, it would begin to kind of economically drive out potential tenants that may want to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, I'm sensitive to not wanting to hurt potential for what could go in the spaces. I get that you want to create a space, particularly when we're talking about a building where there's residential above and the residential is paying the freight, so to speak, and that bottom floor is opportunity for the developer as well as for the community. I mean, that's the eye level stuff that the person walking down the sidewalk interacts with, right? But it's also where the developer stands to make a bunch of money or lose a bunch of money. There's risk involved for everyone on all sides of it. So I don't want to box it in too much. But because are living through the experience of not boxing it in at all, and having a nearly blighted brand new storefront that just sits there with exposed dirt that's not doing anything for anybody as you walk down the sidewalk. Not only downtown, by the way, and closer to Midtown, but there are out parcels in several areas of town where that's the case. There's one up on Northwest 13th Street near 53rd Avenue that sat for years and years and years as a building, as an out parcel, waiting for the right tenant to come along. And you drive into the parking lot of this big box store, you drive past a dirt floor building. So it's not uncommon at all. I'm sympathetic to the opportunity cost, but we have to find a balance in there somewhere that gets us to a better spot and keeps us from subjecting our neighbors to a space that's just waiting for the right tenant for a decade. That doesn't work. I do want to go back to a comment that Commissioner Santos made about a meeting, a sunshine meeting that we had in this room. He and I and Commissioner Johnson and several staff members, I think it was late summer or early fall of 2019, specific to this issue, to the storefront issue. And we had engaged the research staff and city manager staff, and I think Mr. Bredfeld and several staffers and ourselves to come up with ideas. And we had a really great discussion about what's possible and what we didn't know if it was possible or not, and some ideas that we wanted to come back. So I'd like to revisit the results of that meeting, because I think there's some answers there, maybe. Definitely some things that we asked to be brought back that just I don't think ever made it back to a meeting. And I'd like to revisit that and see if there's something good from that, and or reschedule a conversation just about this with all the right people in the room to get some good ideas, because this is straight up economic development, and it's something that either will spur our community forward or continue to hold it back, and we need to have those conversations. Thank you.
Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and so there was a policy paper too, I think, that went into all the different ones on that. So Mr. Blythe, for me it would be just ground floor, and I think having exemptions would be a great idea too. Where I saw this kind of mainly where it's being focused in one of the places, I think it's been done successfully with St. Petersburg along their main road. They were trying to ensure that they were getting local small businesses in there and not the major ones. I mean, they were having a problem, I think, where large chains were coming in and taking over places. Not as much of an issue we have here, but their thing was trying to get the local small businesses to be able to build space as they could, and I think it was effective. I'd like to throw up a motion kind of on, seeing where we had consensus, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor?
Do you mind if I run down the list before you do that? Just I'm trying to keep notes of sort of everyone's asks, and if I missed anything, you can include it. And then, I'll definitely recognize you for a motion. Elevating the Waldo Road kind of economic redevelopment issue, looking to find some ways to remove barriers for redevelopment while still maintaining high quality redevelopment. Commissioner, is that fair to what you're, okay. The trans exit, right. For Commissioner Johnson, I feel like your questions about the food trucks were largely answered. There might be a few dangling questions out there, but then elevating the discussion of the public benefits for increased density, and just moving that back to the plan board and commission as soon as possible. If that's before the comprehensive plan update addresses it, then great. If it happens to coincide with that, then I guess that's what it is, but as soon as it's ready. For Commissioner Santos, moving forward with eliminating parking minimums. What I suggest, Commissioner, is that we ask the plan board to once again review all of the work that's been done on commercial vacancies, and then forward their recommendations to the City Commission. Since it sounds like a lot has been done on this, we just need everything to be focused and come back to us for action. From Member Hawkins, I think I believe the historic preservation planner is being is out for hire. I don't think that's I don't think that's a budget increment the commission needs to consider for next budget. It's there as a full-time equivalent. It just is out for hire right now. I do want to mention about the priorities. I'm never going to be an absolutist, and I'm not ever going to say we should put all of the city commission's priorities and referrals before outside applications. For two reasons. One is we as a commission have a habit of making more and more and more referrals, that could be a never-ending list. Second, one thing that we need to, I think, be very aware of is any delaying action we impose as a commission drives up development cost, which drives up the cost of housing. So if we do something that's going to delay any sort of housing from moving forward for, say, a year, I'm just, this is a big list, I think it would take at least a year, then one thing that definitely happens is a lot of people just choose not to do it because they've got limited windows, they've got limited financing, and they're going to go to where they can do their projects. And the second, it just continues to increase cost, which gets, of course, passed on to the final user. We need to prioritize, and I think that's what we're being asked to do tonight. What on this list do we want to our staff to spend more time on? They're already spending a tremendous amount of time on many very impactful items. We just added more to that list. We also need to allow for these applications to move forward. If it becomes the standard policy of the commission that we're not going to deal with these private applications until all of our referrals are taken care of, we're going to have a lot of problems attracting any development. And so it needs to be a balance. It's Aristotle's golden mean. It's not all of our priorities, and it's not all of the applications. It's somewhere in between is the golden mean there. We just need to consistently revisit where our priorities are. Let staff know that's what we want them to be focusing on while they're processing these applications in the order that they're submitted, to be able to keep things moving along. So I did want to weigh in on that one. Commissioner Ariola, I think, talked more generally about wanting to make sure we focus on walkable communities, on solid economic development, and some of those other big principles that we're sort of incorporating into the comp plan update. So, Commissioner, I think that's sort of the big items that I heard. If there's any that I left out, you can, of course, include them in the motion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So 4 parts would be first and second, that we would kind of forward on to the plan board to start work on the removal of parking minimums and vacant storefronts. The third portion is that we have the plan board continue to work on the Waldo Road transect zones issue and to bring that back to the commission. And then fourth, that we have the policy research staff prioritize working on the community benefit for increased density.
Second.
Sorry, just writing this down. Okay, so Commissioner Santos made the motion, 4 parts. One, to ask the plan board to come back to us with a recommendation on removing minimum parking, and 2, to work on a recommendation for vacancies, commercial vacancies. Third, to bring back some recommendations on removing barriers in the Waldo Road area transect zones, and then fourth, asking the policy research to bring back some recommendations on public benefits for increasing density, and that was second was by Commissioner Simmons. Over to you, Commissioner Simmons.
Commissioner Santos, would you mind adding for the Water Road Transit? I want this to be moved up on the list. I want this to be a priority. Would you mind adding that to the motion?
You're talking about the Waldo Road?
Mm-hmm.
They're already talking about it. They talked about it at the last meeting, so it already is something that they're. So yes, I mean I prioritize it, but yeah, they already are.
Move it up the list.
Okay.
And thank you. I didn't know if Commissioner Johnson she was discussing the commercial community land trust. I didn't know if you wanted to add that to the motion to give some direction to staff to look into that.
Well, unless I heard wrong, that would be included in the vacancy discussion, because I think that's one of the potential mechanisms to address that issue. There are lots of things that got brought up, including that the sort of commercial land trust idea. the build out idea, the subsidy idea. I just think plus whatever the three of you discussed, was it 2019, you said?
Yeah.
So those, I mean, dusting those off and bringing that, so all of that to the plan board with a set of recommendations back to the commission for that item.
Okay.
Commissioner Santos.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to confirm because Mr. Persons, or the chair of the plan board, you all are working on the transit zoning kind of Waldo Road issue. Is that correct? I think I remember watching a little bit of that on the last plan board meeting.
Mr. Mayor, the plan board's talked about it, and I think, you know, based on the discussion that we've had here, like what we'll probably do is just generate an item like for them to work through something. Because as I mentioned, I think maybe some code changes and maybe some zoning changes, maybe a combination.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in support of the motion. Those are all fine priorities. If we could add to the motion, bringing back recommendations on improved sidewalk requirements, I would appreciate that.
Could you say that a little louder? I didn't.
Sorry. To add to the motion, to bring back recommendations on improved sidewalk requirements.
Commissioner Santos?
Yeah, I'm very supportive. I guess, what do you mean by improved sidewalk improvements? We're kind of just to give some direction.
Yeah, at the end of the day, new development that's going to be introduced in the city needs to have walkable sidewalks adjacent to the development. And walkable means not having light posts, trees, trash cans right in the middle of the way where people can't even go 3 wide.
I'm very supportive of that, and I would definitely put that on the list.
Commissioner Simmons? Yeah. Okay, so that'll be a 5th part of the motion. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, members of the plan board, for your helpful and insightful discussion. I know that you spend a tremendous amount of time at no compensation except knowing you're doing good for your neighbors on this work. So it really does go noticed and appreciated, and we are incredibly grateful. So at that, we'll turn it over to public comment. We'll start with anybody in the chamber that wishes to comment on the motion. Welcome.
Hello. I really wish that you would also have your plan board make careful study of the idea that having vast tracts of single-family only zoning is really restrictive or exclusionary in its impact. And if we're moving forward with getting rid of discrimination in this city, that's something you really should be considering as well. And I wanted to have some references ready to offer you, but I can't seem to get online on your Wi-Fi. So I could offer that back later if they will take up that line of study.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Bloughton. Before I go to Adam, actually, we Thursday will be approving a ranking for a firm that's going to bring back recommendations to the city of removing exclusionary zoning policies and advancing inclusionary zoning policies. And so that is exactly the kind of thing that they're going to be looking at, both historical and current examples of communities that have reversed those and how they've done it, and then bring those back to the commission. So those recommendations will first go to the plan board, we'll have a discussion about it, and then finally to us. So be engaged in that process. It's the same group that's doing the equity-based comprehensive plan update. So they'll be closely matched. Okay, Adam, over to you.
Well, Mr. Mayor, there's nobody on the line right now. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Sophia, hello.
Hey there, I realized I must have raised my hand too late because moments after I did, Santos came on the floor with a motion. But I did want to vocalize a couple things before y'all do come to vote, and I understand if it's too late to add that into the motion. But I did want to mention a priority. The fiber optics is necessary with new development. I noticed that's in low priority, and I would really, really love to see that come into a higher priority. I'm sure we're all aware now about the importance of having fiber optic, and internet access around our community. So I think especially including that new development. So just prioritizing that would be really, really good. And then I saw some updates on the list, and I apologize. I wasn't obviously on the board before when all these ideas came forward, so I'm playing a little bit of a catch up here. But the discussion on proposed on density in downtown and U9 districts, and also a discussion around density in residential conservation zones. I wanted to maybe open up a dialogue about that or hear from both of the people who brought those ideas forward, and echo what was just mentioned in the chambers by our community member Blount about the fact that we should remain really cognizant of where we're limiting development and what effects that can have, right? Because, you know, if we are constricting development in some places, that can then lead to growth in other areas and then result in gentrification. And so I just kind of wanted to hear a bit more discussion around what were the intentions on adjusting the densities in downtown or U9, as well as residential conservation. And then I wanted to respond to something Mayor Poe had mentioned about, you know, the vacancy tax, and that we know that we are preempted by the state of Florida from doing that. And just some other things that I had researched, one being a capital gains tax that is essentially supposed to tax the long-term profits that one might gain from speculation. And so just kind of bringing that forward as a potential idea, seeing if we are preempted by the state in that sense, and just kind of keeping that conversation going on what we're doing about a lot of these vacant lots and vacant commercial properties. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And for the fiber discussion, we're going to be having a discussion about broadband on March 4th with the City Commission. You know, that can be one part of the discussion. I know there's another request I made to the general manager and city manager about how some communities are using their CARES funding to bring wireless broadband through the schools as the hub to all of the students even in single family zoning. So there's some models out there that, you know, I think we could leverage current funding that could create a long-term benefit for a community when it comes to broadband. So anyway, that will come up on the 4th. And then really kind of dovetailing with the comments I just made about exclusionary zoning and sort of where we're encouraging and discouraging certain type of development will be part of that exclusionary and inclusionary research and support that hopefully we'll approve on Thursday to move forward with. We'll approve some that we're asking me to approve the ranking of the applicants. Commissioner Hayes Santos?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think some places actually use those CARES dollars for fixed internet too, actually to the homes too, of actually building out broadband infrastructure. So I want to answer Sophia's questions, but those were two that I put on there. The reasons for Midtown was by increasing the density in Midtown, it would take less pressure off of other neighborhoods. People want to live close to the university, so if we can allow more people to live close to the university, then it would reduce pressure in surrounding neighborhoods. And then for DT and D9 or U9 and some of the other higher zoning, and really kind of the zoning, the density that we have in there kind of forces more bedrooms and doesn't really allow for 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. Kind of how our density isn't really high enough to allow for 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. So developers go with 3 or 4 more bedroom units because they can make more money, but it's somewhat being pushed by our density that we have there as well. So a discussion on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And that takes us to a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Ward,
Aye.
Commissioner Hayes Santos,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Ariola,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Sacco,
Aye.
and Mayor Poe.
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. Again, thank you for the discussion. Thank you for all the incredible work. I know this has been a really tough year for y'all, and you know, meeting virtually is no picnic, but you've really worked hard to keep things coming to us and keep things moving along, both in the, you know, sort of individual applications and the broader policy initiatives. I was really pleased to see how much had come back to you and is really ready for consideration by the commission. Some really heavy lifts in there too, not just simple strike a word or two and call it a change. So it goes without saying that we couldn't do this without y'all, and we know how difficult the job is, and we're incredibly thankful. Are there any member comments from the plan board? We're to member comment on the agenda now. Miss.
Yes, I did have a question.
Yeah. Good.
Sorry, I had a question about like those couple discussion items that I had brought up, and I guess just generally speaking, what the next steps are on some of these items. Like, are we gonna have conversation about some of these again? I know a few are going to be discussed during the comp plan update. So I guess I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of a better idea, if possible, on where, you know, these discussions are kind of going for some of these items.
Yeah, so some of them are ready to come to the commission. Some of them are with staff, and we'll come back to y'all for discussion, and then a recommendation to the commission. And some of them are sort of just going to staff, and so they'll need to do some preliminary work and research before bringing them to y'all. And I think in the backup, you kind of get an idea of where those different things are.
Sounds good, thank you.
Member Certain, I thought I saw your hand up. Did you pull it down?
I did pull it down. How are you all tonight?
We're wonderful. Thanks for being with us.
Yes, hello. I actually came on, this is my first meeting, so it was good. I was just kind of sitting back listening. I learned doing a school concurrency meeting about 3 weeks ago that I was the school board member of the plan board. So I did not realize that, but I thought I would hop on tonight to kind of get the tenor of what's going on. I don't think we would have any school concurrency issues with the city of Gainesville, especially because a lot of our schools in the East are under enrolled. So any changes to the comp plan that would yield more housing or would impact student seats would increase the number of students enrolled in East Gainesville schools or schools within the city limits that are in the East, I don't think would cause a problem for us. So we wouldn't have to really talk about that with the board. But I'll be popping in now that I know I am on this committee for the representing school board.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're thrilled that you are the school board's representative on the plan. Very, very important to have your input, and I think also just for you to be able to take back to your colleagues the kind of issues that are being discussed and how that might impact our schools and our families. So we're thrilled to have your active participation, for sure.
Thank you. Good to join you all. Good to see you all.
Absolutely. Stay well. Stay healthy.
You too.
Okay, and I don't see any lights from the commission, so we really appreciate everybody. Have a healthy and happy rest of your evening, and we look forward to those recommendations coming back to the commission. And with that, our business has concluded, and we are adjourned.